Everything started from one bold question that nobody inside NASCAR had the courage to ask out loud. What takes place when somebody skips the usual waiting period entirely and still walks directly into the center of the brightest stage? That exact scenario played out with Cleetus McFarland, the driver known around the garage as Garrett Mitchell. In the early stages, the whole situation seemed totally innocent, even invigorating and packed with raw vitality. A YouTuber stepping into the NASCAR realm, it struck everyone as a fun side story, something brand new and distinctive, the kind of thing supporters could genuinely rally behind and cheer for. He had no intention of shaking the whole structure to its core, but things escalated fast and furiously. Cleetus never followed the conventional path that every other competitor had taken. There was no long, grueling battle in late-model cars, no endless seasons of short-track battles waged beneath dim track lights, no slow climb up the ladder where each small victory had to be earned through sweat and sacrifice. Instead, he built something completely fresh and massive, an enormous fan base that followed his every move. Millions of people watched closely as he designed wild, over-the-top vehicles, pushed every limit imaginable, and turned the sport of racing into nothing short of pure, unfiltered entertainment. He was never simply a racer, he became a full-blown show all by himself, and for quite a while that strategy delivered results. When he first stepped into ARCA competition, the bar was set incredibly low, basically at zero. No one was expecting him to win races, they only wondered whether he could even keep the car planted firmly on the track's surface. And amazingly, he pulled it off. Not in some perfect, show-stopping fashion, but well enough to get the job done. Well enough to finish every event he entered, well enough to reveal quick flashes of real talent, well enough to make observers pause and wonder if this was more than just a clever stunt. Maybe there was genuine depth and potential underneath. Yet NASCAR never thrives on vague possibilities, and that is the precise moment when the entire situation shifted dramatically. Without any advance notice, Cleetus landed a major alliance with Richard Childress Racing. And right away, everything felt different. This was no longer just a content creator dabbling in a new hobby. This had turned serious and legitimate. Top-tier equipment, real expectations, real pressure, and most importantly, real and intense scrutiny from every corner. Inside the garage area, fellow drivers started paying close attention and they started voicing concerns. Not in loud, public outbursts at the beginning, not in an aggressive manner, just quiet conversations that slowly built into something much bigger and more widespread. How did he manage to reach this level so rapidly? Why was the opportunity handed to him in particular? What about all the drivers who had poured years of their lives into chasing that very same chance? That was the point when the first real cracks began to show. Mark Martin stepped forward as one of the first to address it head-on. He refused to dodge the topic or soften his words. He openly questioned whether a handful of qualifying runs and very limited experience were truly enough to justify racing at the highest level. And he made it crystal clear that the issue went far beyond lap times or finishing positions. It was first and foremost about safety. NASCAR offers no forgiveness whatsoever. On tracks like Rockingham, even the smallest mistake can quickly spiral into something far more dangerous and serious. Experience in those conditions is not just helpful, it is absolutely necessary for survival, and Cleetus simply did not have much of it at all. Then more voices stepped in, adding even greater levels of concern and doubt. Kyle Busch joined the conversation and pointed out something that hit even harder. Young drivers who have dreamed of this their entire lives usually rack up far more hours behind the wheel long before they ever get this far. Far more. Yet here was Cleetus, already being given opportunities that many of those same drivers had never come close to receiving. It was not driven by anger or resentment, it felt more like cool, clear-eyed doubt. Because the traditional system had always been simple and straightforward. You prove yourself step by step, you move up gradually, and you earn every single advancement along the way. But Cleetus had skipped that entire process. He took a completely different path, and now he was standing in the same arena. Even the drivers trying their best to stay neutral could not ignore what was happening. Brad Keselowski acknowledged the business reality of it all. Yes, from a commercial angle it made perfect sense. Cleetus brought massive visibility, loyal followers, and widespread attention. But that reality did not erase the bigger underlying problem. What about the proper qualification standards that everyone else had always respected? Because this was not only about creating entertainment, it involved high-speed competition, real consequences, and genuine risk at every turn. And that is exactly where the entire situation started to feel uncomfortable for many. From NASCAR's viewpoint, however, Cleetus represented real value, serious value that could not be overlooked. Every time he lined up for a race, viewers tuned in by the thousands. Fans who had never cared about NASCAR before suddenly started watching. Social media exploded with activity, engagement levels skyrocketed. That kind of exposure was impossible to ignore. But back inside the garage, that same value created noticeable tension and friction. Because some drivers began to feel that something basic was changing, that perhaps NASCAR was no longer focused only on the most talented and prepared competitors. Perhaps it was also shifting toward whoever could bring the biggest spotlight and attention. And if that was truly the case, then what would happen to the system they had all depended on for so many years? That heavy question hung in the air for everyone. And then Daytona came around. His debut in the Truck Series, the moment that could have started silencing all the critics. Instead, it did the complete opposite and produced a collision. It happened early in the event, fast and unforgiving in everything it represented. Because it did not simply end his day on the track, it gave the doubters exactly the proof they had been waiting for. Proof that maybe he was not ready after all, proof that perhaps those concerns were not just personal opinions but valid warnings. In NASCAR, first impressions matter deeply and negative ones tend to stick around. They follow you persistently and often grow larger over time. Suddenly, the conversation shifted away from potential and promise and moved straight toward risk and danger, toward whether putting him in that position had been the right call in the first place. And just like that, the whole story flipped. From curiosity and excitement to outright controversy, from support and energy to clear division. But this is where things became truly fascinating, because instead of backing down or stepping away, Cleetus pushed himself forward with even more determination than before. While the garage kept talking among themselves, while fans argued back and forth, while skeptics added more and more reservations, he went back to work with total focus, testing, logging laps, studying every mistake in detail, spending long hours at Rockingham, driving himself harder than anyone expected. No cameras rolling, no big public statements, just pure dedication that was quiet yet unbreakable. And during one of those extended practice sessions, something happened that was small on the surface but carried real weight. The kind of moment that looks minor at first glance until you fully understand its deeper meaning. It did not look like a major news story right away. No crash, no fire, no chaos, just a car starting to lose its grip. Midway through a long run at Rockingham on tires that had worn down and lost their bite, the kind that punish even the slightest mistake, the rear end suddenly broke loose. It was not a gentle slide that was easy to catch. This was the type of instant that can ruin an entire session. The angle grew worse quickly. The car began to spin, and for a split second it felt exactly like Daytona all over again. Another loss of control, another reason for everyone to say he was way over his head. But then the whole thing changed in an instant. No panic, no sudden jerk of the wheel, just a smooth, calm, precise correction. He caught the car, held it steady, saved the situation completely, and kept rolling forward without missing a beat. That was it. No loud celebration, no dramatic radio call, just a quiet instant where disaster was prevented. But once the video made its way online, the entire viewpoint shifted dramatically. Because suddenly, people were no longer watching a YouTuber barely hanging on, they were watching a driver who was clearly growing and improving. And that is where the split among fans grew even wider. Some supporters embraced the moment immediately and without hesitation. They saw real progress, the kind that only comes from serious, dedicated work. Countless hours spent on the track, mistakes turned into valuable lessons. To them, this was solid proof. Proof that Cleetus was not there just for the spotlight, he was advancing, earning his place one step at a time. But others refused to move even an inch from their original stance. Because to them, one successful save does not rewrite the full story. Consistency does. And Cleetus had not shown that level of consistency yet, especially not in real race conditions when the pressure and stakes were at their highest. And that sits right at the heart of this entire situation. Two completely opposite ways of seeing the exact same moment, real development or just a lucky look. And right in the middle of that divide, Cleetus kept moving forward without pause. Because here is what most people tend to miss entirely. While the debates rage across the internet, while drivers keep offering their thoughts, while fans pick their sides, he stays focused on the work, stays competing, stays chasing the one thing that comes only through time and repetition, real experience. And he is chasing it in a way that is totally different from everyone else. By owning the Freedom Factory, he never has to sit around waiting for seat time. He creates his own opportunities, whether it is day or night, lap after lap, with no limits on how many times he can run the same lines. That gives him a real advantage, and a big one at that, because in racing, feel and instinct matter more than almost anything else, and that feel only develops through hours upon hours on the track. But even that advantage has its clear boundaries. No matter how many laps you turn in private, it is completely different from actual race conditions. It is different from fighting through traffic, from dealing with intense pressure, from making split-second decisions when cars are surrounding you on every side. And that is exactly where all eyes are locked right now on the next race coming up. Because whether people admit it openly or not, this feels like the true test. Not in any official rulebook sense, not on paper, but emotionally, for the fans, for the drivers, and for the entire conversation surrounding him, this is the moment of truth. If he goes out there and keeps everything clean, if he races smart, stays out of trouble, and shows control for a full event instead of just quick flashes, then something important shifts. The criticism will not disappear completely, but it will soften and the questions will start to change. And for the first time, people might begin to say, all right, maybe he really does belong here after all. But if things go another way, if another mistake appears, another collision, another moment that strengthens the current story, then everything ramps up, becomes harsher, and the divide grows even deeper. Because the truth is, Cleetus is not judged the same way as a typical driver. He cannot be. A normal rookie gets time and space to learn, room to make mistakes without the whole world watching every second. Cleetus does not have that luxury. Every error gets blown up larger, every success gets examined under a microscope, and every single moment draws intense focus. And that pressure never lets up for a moment. But here's the surprising part that nobody can dismiss any longer. He has already changed something important, whether people want to admit it or not. Because right now drivers are talking about him, fans are arguing about him, the spotlight stays locked on him, and that kind of attention does not happen by accident. It happens when someone shakes up the established way of doing things, when they force a sport to look at itself and face some tough, uncomfortable questions. What matters more in the end? The long road of traditional development or the final result? Respect for the past or openness to new ways forward? Because Cleetus McFarland represents both sides at the exact same time. He is the outsider who skipped multiple steps, and the racer working hard to prove he can still master every one of them. And that built-in tension, that is what makes this story impossible to turn away from. Because we have seen versions of this before in different forms. People dismissed, people doubted, people told they did not belong, and sometimes they proved every single critic wrong. But sometimes they do not, and right now nobody can say for certain which path this will follow. Not the fans, not the drivers, and maybe not even Cleetus himself. All we know is this. The next time he straps into that car, it will not be just another race, it will stand as a clear statement in one direction or the other. Because in the end, there is no hiding in NASCAR, no shortcuts once the green flag drops, only speed, skill, and cold, hard reality. So the real question is not whether Cleetus McFarland got here by a different route, that part is already written into the record. The true question is what happens from here. Will he rise up and meet the challenge head-on, or will he end up as the warning story everyone had predicted all along?